When I was younger and went to the doctor for my checkup, the doctor would inevitably ask if I was experiencing any health issues, such as aches or pains. If I admitted to some ailments, he would ask for symptoms to help lay the groundwork for a prognosis, a path to wellness. My choices to get well depended on simple truths, like I was getting older, or I had bad eating habits and a stressful job. The symptoms helped me understand, adapt, and then fix my health. Aviations experienced similar symptoms. In the early 1900s, as aviation safety evolved, maintaining safety began with early techniques that seem archaic by today's standards. Airway beacons led to air traffic control centers, which guided aircraft across great distances. As accidents happened, the aviation community determined the symptoms and set up ways to fix the problems, no matter how difficult the investigation was. The quality of aviation safety that we came to know is gone. The attentions to detail, the experience levels that came with each FAA inspector, the levels of flight hours pilots acquired, the mechanics, fundamental understanding of basic aircraft systems, all of it is gone. The aviation industry must step back in order to see that resistance to safety comes from within. We need to uproot the useless leftovers from previous administrations who have dug in, scratching desperately for their old expired powers, too paranoid to let go. Hello, I'm Stephen Carbone, and this is By Reason of Air Safety. We're not there anymore. Like our failed education system, COVID repercussions, and ideological stupidity inside and outside our federal government have undermined aviation safety. We have no leadership to pull us from this analogical tar pit. Secretary Duffy is doing his best, but he's fighting for transportation safety on 5 separate fronts. And unfortunately, the ideologies are too deeply rooted. The same FAA upper managers under Buttigieg are still there. The ones who ignored aviation safety before Secretary Duffy took the oath are still in place, making decisions they were never too happy to make under Buttigieg or were too scared to push back. Instead, they watched quietly as Buttigieg tried to destroy the FAA. What happened to the qualifications the FAA required for inspectors? Airlines, industry, and the FAA don't hire for quality anymore. They hire for numbers, for quantity. Unethical paper pushers are creating skill vacuums in the most safety-sensitive professions in transportation. Then, when accidents happen, these paper pushers excuse poor behavior by pointing fingers. What happened to accident investigation quality? For instance, take the BOAC Flight 781 Comet accident. The airliner was lost in the ocean and was unrecoverable. Yet aviation folks persevered and discovered root cause without flight data or cockpit voice recorders. These aviation folks fixed the problems with redesigns, made use of technologies to improve aviation safety. These professionals drove safety first. They focused on learning to improve. These aviation professionals learned to recognize the symptoms. I flew on a narrow-body airliner a couple of months ago. The plane was loaded, passengers seated before the captain announced the flight would be delayed because the plane needed the hydraulic system serviced. Servicing hydraulics normally takes about 15 minutes. That day, it took 2.5 hours, 10 times as long. Now, there are some who would consider this an inconvenience, but not a safety issue. And those people don't see the symptoms of the problem. First, the hydraulics was serviced by a maintenance contractor. According to the regulations, the maintenance provider's work is the airline's responsibility, not the contractor's. The airline violated Title 14 CFR Section 128.368, which is contract maintenance. Now, I've serviced hydraulics on hundreds of airliners, both narrow and wide body. It's factually a 15-minute job. As I, a former airline mechanic, watched from my window seat, these two contract mechanics fumbled around for 2.5 hours. As a former FAA inspector, I wrote a safety request to the Airline Certificate Management Office, the CMO, to look into the matter. They said they investigated, but they found no safety issues, which is what I consider an FAA failure. In my opinion, I disagreed with the finding. A major airline's contract maintenance provider lacking the training to do a minor task like servicing hydraulics is a safety risk. Then there was the other symptom. The airline CMO failed to investigate the airline pilots who flew the airplane into the airport. They were the same airline pilots that flew it out. These pilots failed to, intentionally or unintentionally, ask for hydraulic servicing during the 1 hour layover until pushback time. The pilots failed to ensure their aircraft was airworthy, was ready for the departure flight, as per their airline's post-flight checks. There are 3 problems with this event that lead to solutions. First, contract mechanics were not properly trained to accomplish a minor task. What other work were they doing on other aircraft that they were doing wrong? 2, the pilots ignored their own procedures for preparing the aircraft for flight before the passengers boarded. And for 3, the FAA inspectors who investigated the event appeared unfamiliar with regulations that applied to training and contract maintenance requirements. The FAA principal inspectors for both operations and maintenance failed to investigate properly. I was never contacted concerning the event, so the inspectors proceeded without doing necessary follow-up. There should also be some kind of archive where the investigation results could be reviewed and the safety issues were ignored and continued to exist. Other stories seen in the media. In January of 2024, a Bogota-bound Delta 757 lost a nose gear tire while taxiing in Atlanta. In March 2024, United Flight 35, a 777 out of San Francisco, lost the main gear tire during takeoff. In July 2024, United Flight 1001, a 777, this time out of Los Angeles, also lost a main gear tire during takeoff. In August of 2024, Delta Airlines tire exploded, killing 2 Delta mechanics. Who thinks these were a big deal? Anybody at the FAA? The NTSB? I ask because neither agency responded to the events. So let's talk about why a 757 nose tire that came off during taxi was a big deal. A bolt this size was why the tire came off. Let me explain. By the lock bolt, which this was, not being secured, the axle nut was allowed to turn and back off the axle. As the B757 taxied, the axle nut rotated off, which allowed the tire to come off the axle and roll away. The purpose of the lock bolt is to prevent the axle nut from rotating off. That is its sole purpose, to secure the axle nut. Now, of course, some bozos blamed Boeing right away, Boeing bad, and that was just idiotic. But the average person may say, so what? The NTSB may even say, big deal. The FAA, they didn't notice. And nothing to see here, said United and Delta. Except there's a lot to see here. This is what happens when mechanics don't follow the maintenance instructions for minor tasks, like tire changes and hydraulic servicing. When airline mechanics don't follow their instructions for maintenance, when they don't follow the rules, accidents like Colgan 9446 happen. or accidents like American Flight 191 in Chicago happens. In the 4 tire incidents, the 2 at Delta and the 2 at United, Delta and United's mechanics didn't follow the manufacturer's maintenance manual procedures. Otherwise, the tires wouldn't have come off, and the 2 mechanics in Atlanta would still be alive. So what about damage to the aircraft? Would a missing tire be a problem? And where did the tires go? Well, the Delta B757 nose tire went into a ditch. The pilots of the plane didn't even know the tire fell off. They were told by another Delta pilot in another airplane. Meanwhile, the 200-pound San Francisco United 777 main tire fell over 100 feet, still spinning, into an airport parking lot. So what about the damage to parked cars or the chance that a pedestrian was hit by a 200-pound tire? Or what if the tire fell on Interstate 380 or El Camino Real? The United Airlines source stated the 777-200 has 6 tires on each of its main landing struts. The United Airlines source went on to say that the aircraft is designed to land safely with missing or damaged tires. Let's unpack that deceptive statement. While tires can become damaged, there are no airliners designed to be airworthy with missing tires. That's not a certification standard. Instead, it's United's ludicrous justification of the event. The 777 has 12 main gear tires, 6 on each main gear. The 777 can land with a damaged tire, but each tire supports 8.3% of the aircraft's landing weight. When its tire is damaged, that 8.3% is transferred to the other tires. Each tire ensures 8.3% of aircraft traction and control. If a tire is missing or damaged, that's 8.3% less braking, 8.3% less control under crosswind landings, and 8.3% less design stability in icing conditions where anti-skid is employed. And here's the kicker. Tire changes are minor jobs, just like the hydraulic servicing mentioned earlier. Mechanics change tires every single day. Think about it. If mechanics fail to change a tire correctly, if someone forgot to put a bolt this size back in the aircraft, then what other hardware is being forgotten? What other maintenance procedures are being ignored? Could they maybe leave the bolts out of a door? The Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 door departure, the door came off because of missing hardware. The bolts were not installed, like with the Delta and United Airlines planes. By the way, how do we know Alaska Airlines didn't forget to install the door hardware? But we'll talk about that in episode 7. Again, these are symptoms of bigger problems that we know go beyond one airline, possibly more. Technicians at both Delta and United weren't following the regulations, the rules that dictate their maintenance programs, specifically Title 14 CFR Part 121 Subpart L, as in Lima. These tire events demonstrated failures to follow Part 121, Section 121.363, which is responsibility for airworthiness. Who signed for the tire replacement? Or Section 121.369, manual requirements. Did they follow the manual procedures? And Section 121.375, which is maintenance and preventive maintenance training programs. So what kind of solutions can we find in these unsafe events so that they can be fixed? These safety issues demand complete investigations where results are documented, analyzed, corrected, reported, and the results available to the public. Events like these must never be ignored. Corrective actions must be determined because these so-called minor problems will only get worse. These 4 events were reported after the Alaska 1282 door event, which happened on January 5th, 2024. However, that doesn't mean the symptoms that led to the tire events didn't exist before Alaska 1282. It is likely the symptoms that led to these 4 events were months, perhaps a year or more in the making. We, the flying public, rely 100% on the FAA and the NTSB to be diligent, to keep an eye out for these safety trends. As a transportation investigatory agency, the NTSB should have recognized the importance of these events. The media actually beat the NTSB to the story. The media, not the NTSB, took it seriously. As a transportation regulatory agency, the FAA should have investigated these events publicly. There should have been finalized reports made available to the public and the major airlines, and the media reported these events to the public while the FAA dismissed them as unimportant. As an investigatory agency, the NTSB should have questioned the trends. 3 planes losing tires during active flights, 2 mechanics killed. These were all symptoms of more important safety issues. And the media reported on all 4 events at 3 major airports, yet the NTSB should have been paying attention. As a regulatory agency, the FAA should have recognized these events were important. However, since these events related to oversight of United and Delta's maintenance programs, the FAA should have taken them seriously just for the point of view that they were overseeing those maintenance programs. And last, as an investigatory agency, the NTSB should have recognized pending maintenance issues. However, since the NTSB doesn't have maintenance experienced investigators looking at maintenance, systems, power plants, and structures, the NTSB will continue to fail at recognizing maintenance issues. And that's the problem. The NTSB does not understand the aviation industry, and therefore what is unusual or potentially unsafe. They cannot identify it. Furthermore, the NTSB doesn't understand root cause analysis. So the NTSB doesn't understand trends. How can the NTSB criticize other agencies for what the NTSB, clearly doesn't understand? Fixing transportation safety is the very reason the NTSB exists. I think the NTSB should start fixing the problems. Where were the NTSB board members and NTSB upper management who kept telling us they were experts? If NTSB board members were engaged, they would have investigated the air traffic control system problems told to us by Secretary Duffy. Did the NTSB know the FAA was using DEI hiring practices? Was the NTSB using DEI hiring practices? Did NTSB board members know Buttigieg was threatening to fire FAA inspectors for not taking the vaccine? And did NTSB management know firing experienced FAA inspectors would hurt aviation safety? Or did the board members just want to save their own jobs? The bottom line is the NTSB must improve safety. That's their mandate. They shouldn't be idle, only to speak when accidents occur. Title 49 CFR Section 831.4 says the NTSB must prevent accidents. And what about the FAA? For the 4 events with the tires, this is a major FAA failure. Why? Because even after the events happened and the media reported it, the FAA never made it out of the gate. Their investigations were never qualified. Where are these investigation results? Can these investigations be obtained through the Freedom of Information Act? FAA management and bureaucratic upper echelons have been suffering from a lack of spine. Secretary Duffy took charge in January 2025, and yet the air traffic control system has been out of date for decades. Did FAA's upper management suddenly realize the air traffic system problems were there? Didn't FAA upper management notice the air traffic control system was archaic? Or did Secretary Duffy surprise them with this knowledge? And if they were surprised, why are they still running the FAA? And how many of Buttigieg's FAA upper managers are still in important FAA positions after sitting on the air traffic systems problems for so long? And also, where were the empty suits who pretended to be FAA administrators or acting administrators? And did these empty suits or upper managers push back on Buttigieg's DEI practices? And when Buttigieg threatened to fire FAA inspectors who refused the COVID vaccine, why did these FAA upper managers remain silent? The FAA's self-auditing program, the FSEP program, the Flight Standards Evaluation Program, must be reestablished. The FAA requires industry to have a safety management system, an SMS, to self-audit. But the FAA refuses to maintain its own SMS. In other words, do as I say, not as I do. How can the FAA prevent corruption and waste when they don't employ SMS? Then there's the Congress, whose annual budgetary cries for attention result in cutting the FAA's regulatory budget. If Secretary Duffy wants to know why air traffic control systems haven't been modified, he need look no further than the United States Congress. The aviation industry's safety has been nothing more than a political game played by feckless congressional representatives who care less about safety and more about votes. They forced the FAA into continuing resolutions where nothing got done for weeks at a time. No oversight, no surveillance, no safety corrections, no safety analysis, no certifications, nothing. I think people need to pay attention to the facts of what's been going on. Then there's the media. It's bad enough the media can't get stories accurate, but then they speculate and ignore the facts. Media outlets can't even find one aviation reporter who actually specializes in aviation. I looked at one aviation reporter's bio, which said that the reporter specialized in aviation and aerospace, culture, the food industry, and entertainment. So where's the attention to the topic? Where are people getting their aviation news from? Folks, enough already. Aviation safety has declined drastically. Reasons can be traced back to the media, the Congress, the NTSB, and even the FAA. Why? Because of COVID and the effects of COVID. Because of diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring practices. Because of breakdowns in upper management confidence. For the lack of quality training. For the absence of self-improvement, of any improvement by government agencies. And the annual abandonment of regulatory oversight because of congressional games. These are all threats to aviation safety. Industry and the regulatory and investigatory agencies must start recognizing the obvious symptoms that are leading to safety problems everywhere. They are as clear as day. Nothing ambiguous about these problems or where they're heading. We looked at 4, 5 if you include the hydraulic servicing. What is needed, however, are serious regulators and investigators. Until next time, I'm Stephen Carbone reminding you to tab. Think safe, act safe, be safe. Take care.